and let us all do we can to build a better future. So there's been a lot of talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. It's clear that he has a long-lasting impact and legacy in American politics. But I think we are all too familiar with in regards to how the establishment has twisted his legacy, his image, and who he was as a person. He is forever immortal in American politics. His impact will be felt for generations to come. But the way the establishment, government agencies, have been viewing Dr. King, they're trying to give us more of a neoliberal version. A nice pleasantry, but ignoring things that made him stand out. The reason why the establishment viewed him as a threat, or Malcolm X as a threat. Could you imagine if AOC or Ilhan Omar talked the same amount of speeches that Dr. King gave on being anti-war and being a socialist? Now, it's one thing to tweet them out. It's another thing, though, to actually be calling it out and demanding action. Dr. King has that history of, again, there's been a lot of speeches of him speaking about being anti-war, talking about socialism, talking about dealing with economic disparity. So I found this clip from MSNBC from Mehdi Hassan to be very interesting. Shot the Case Study QB, who found this clip. Now, I don't know if Mehdi's going to get a good old phone call from the producers like, what are you doing? But I found this to be refreshing. I know there's occasionally some moments where corporate media will do something. I'm very curious how he got the green light to do this, because the establishment media, they don't normally do stuff like this. So what am I talking about? Well, here, I'm going to pull this up. But again, shout out to Case Study QB. If you're not following him on Twitter, please do so. He is wrongly being censored, and it's rather disappointing to see that he's still being censored. So there you go. So let's go ahead and pull up this video and listen to it and check it out. And folks, this is pretty interesting.
But you know what was missing at that memorial? The quotes from the late Dr. King that show what a radical he was. For example, what he said in his Beyond Vietnam speech at the Riverside Church in New York in April 1967, a year before his death. And I quote, "I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government." That quote, weirdly, didn't make it onto any of the walls at his memorial. By the way, can you imagine if AOC or Ilhan Omar said that today, that the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today was the American government? It wouldn't just be Republicans losing their minds. It'd be their fellow Democrats. It'd be the liberal media too, and many ordinary patriotic Americans. But Dr. King said it, because Dr. King wasn't just passionately anti-racism. He was proudly anti-war. He was ferociously anti-poverty. For Dr. King, as he pointed out in that Riverside speech, what needed to be conquered were the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism. Today, we remember Dr. King's struggle against racism. We try often in his name to continue his struggle against racism. The George Floyd protests, the attempts to restrain our trigger-happy police departments and tackle the racial inequality baked into America from the campus to the C-suite to Congress.
Now, again, I'm wondering, who is this person? Is he a clone or a pod person? And how is this allowed to be on MSNBC? This isn't the first time we saw good old Mehdi decide to do something controversial. Remember, he did a whole video segment on Julian Assange too, and why he should not be extradited. I don't know. Maybe he's allowed once a year to do something outside the box. Maybe he has that special privilege. I don't know. But I'm as scared as all of you. How is this being seen on MSNBC of all places?
But how about the struggle against militarism with our bloated Pentagon defense budget and our endless wars abroad, which have left so many people dead? How about the struggle against extreme materialism that has left millions in poverty and destitution while allowing the creation of billionaires who exploit workers and dodge taxes? You know, the New York Times, the liberal New York Times, back then, 3 days after the Riverside speech and Dr. King's talk of the giant triplets and American violence, the Times slammed him in an editorial headlined, "Dr. King's Error." They accused him.
Someone answered the question for me on Rockfin. Denver Attaway wrote, Hassan is allowed to speak truce against the injustices that are long past. The ones ongoing and approaching, silence. Well done, Denver.
Of wrongly fusing two public problems, racism and war, that are distinct and separate. But Dr. King didn't back down. Racism, war, poverty, they were all interconnected for him. Racial justice had to go hand in hand with economic justice. What good is having the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a hamburger, he famously declared. And remember, in March 1968, MLK was assassinated in Memphis, and he was in Memphis to support sanitation workers who were on strike for better pay and conditions. In fact, in 1967, less than a year before his death, Dr. King spoke with NBC News at his Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, about what the pastor called the new phase of the struggle for genuine equality, his Poor People's Campaign.
And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps. But it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Now, I'm going to take some words from Ilhan Omar. First of all, number one, all our problems can be tied to greed. Billionaires have taught us greed is good. Look at what greed has wrought. And these words that Dr. King has stated in this segment still resonate today. And, you know, let's face it, a lot of us are bootless. A lot of us have been working and working and working for the American dream. And, well, owning a home is a dream. Affordable education is a dream. Medicare for all is a dream. You want to know what a nightmare reality is? Ongoing homelessness, small businesses being shut down, medical bankruptcy. These are things that impact millions of Americans. It's rather sad that nothing has fundamentally changed. And again, notice how the establishment media wants to portray Dr. King like, oh, he got us all together. Everyone was unified. You know, everything was all nice. No, that's not it at all. The message that he originally gave to people has long since been edited by the establishment.
And here's something else that they don't tell you about Dr. King. He wasn't a capitalist.
And I just said Ilanar. I said Ilhan. Ilanar. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry.
He was a socialist. Huh? Yeah. The S word that gives everyone from Donald Trump to Nancy Pelosi the jitters. And yet Martin Luther King Jr. was a socialist. As a 23-year-old writing to his then girlfriend, Coretta, in 1952, MLK said, I am much more socialistic in my economic theory than capitalistic, and that capitalism has outlived its usefulness. Over a decade later, just a couple of years before he died, Dr. King said that something is wrong with capitalism and that there must be a better distribution of wealth. Maybe, he said, America must move toward a democratic socialism.
And this was the beginning of when the establishment realized, Dr. King, and yes, even Malcolm X, were trying to reach out to a whole group of people in America, everyone, by saying, hey, guys, this system is rigged and we're all being screwed over. Because the establishment's biggest nightmare, its biggest fear, is when every single American looks at all those jagoffs in Washington, D.C. and Wall Street and realize, hey, wait a minute. It's you guys that have been causing all the problems. It's you guys that have been doing all of this to us. That's the establishment's biggest fear, a United States of America. Ooh, that should be a quote. The establishment's biggest fear is a United States of America. I don't know. Hey, spread that around, you know, from old Kit Kat, you know, Kit Cabello. The establishment's greatest fear is a United States of America. I am rolling with that one. Just came up with it right now. There you go. I could be quoted for something right now. So we'll continue on with the rest of the video because we're not done with this segment yet.
You'll be surprised to hear that that quote isn't on the wall at his DC memorial either, and isn't cited by Republican or Democratic politicians today. So, on this MLK Day, let's be honest with ourselves and with his legacy. Let's remember Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as the man, as the proud radical and socialist he actually was, not as the man we conveniently want him or imagine him to be.
Yeah. And again, we have to remember, everyone in antiquity, everyone that living today, who have made a mark in history, remember, they are people, right? And sometimes society likes to romanticize them and turn them into something that they're not, Dr. King left an impact on American politics, but his image and his legacy has been twisted by the establishment in order for people to keep on drinking the soup of neoliberalism. Well, there's something else that caught my attention too. And I know a lot of people have already been talking about it, and I'd be unfair for me not to talk about it either. But and I know this happened in Sabrina's backyard. I know Sabrina did an outstanding segment on it too. It has to deal with a sculpture in Boston. Now, I am by no means an expert in art, right? I kind of get it a little bit. I can ascertain and look at things, Take, for example, I never knew that the Picasso in Chicago was actually a woman, right? That's the image of a woman. In Chicago, there's a famous Picasso landmark near the Daley Center. No, not Daley Center, near the Daley Building by City Hall. It's a very nice piece of art. I have no idea what the MLK and Coretta Scott King monument was supposed to be. I understand it's the Embrace, but where are their faces? And it what? Don't take my word for it. Here, you're gonna watch it yourself. I'm sorry, but it's just none of it makes any sense. And Don Lemon is going to be interviewing the architect. We're not going to sit through the whole thing, but we'll just play a few minutes of it.
Okay, so a monument meant to honor the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his wife Coretta Scott King's legacy, facing some.
Now, when this was revealed, everyone was cheering, and then there was silence. I'm all for art and creativity, but this is not how you remember Dr. King. This is not how you do it. This is not it.
Backlash. The Embrace, it's called the Embrace. The statue was unveiled Friday at the Boston Common, where King gave a speech back in 1965. It was inspired.
And yes, hold on. Wendy Carballo says it for $10 million. They should have gotten something much, much better. That's $10 million there, folks. And again, I would have. It's just where are their faces at? Where, just, I don't know. I would have done something different. Human beings can interpret things. Don't worry. Chances are you'll hear what they're saying in the video.
By a photograph of the couple hugging after Dr. King won the Nobel Peace Prize back in 1964. So look at the hands in the picture and then look at that. The art piece, designed by conceptual artist Hank Willis Thomas, only features a couple's arms during the embrace and not their heads, which has sparked a mixed reaction.
It's not the missing heads that's the atrocity, although people glam on to that. It's a stump that looks like a penis. That's a joke.
Look at this. Look, YouTubers, I'm sorry, but that looks like a giant penis right there.
I don't want to pile on, but look. Yeah, it looks like that. All right. People, human beings, we're not perfect, but it kind of looks like that, folks, from that angle. It is what it is. Oh, Sabrina, I'm so sorry this is happening in Boston. Hey, folks, that's $10 million right there. 10. That's a 1 and a 0. Give me $10 million. I could show you how it could be done.
YouTubers, I'm sorry, but that looks like a giant penis right there. I'm sorry, it does.
I think the artist did a great job. I'm satisfied, but it represents something that brings people together.
All right, not sure we played some.
Now, in theory, it looks like it could bring people together, but not in unity or understanding or dealing with discrimination or economic disparity. I think it'll bring people together just to laugh at, unfortunately.
Some of that because it's just obviously trolls. But listen, joining us now is
Yeah, and guess who's covering this? Don Lemon. Listen, remember what Farron said about doing the morning shift for corporate news, especially like CNN? That's the low tier kind of stuff. Okay, so Don Lemon, he's not happy to be there.
conceptual artist behind the statue, Hank Willis Thomas. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hank, how are you?
Welcome
Great
to
to
CNN
see you.
this
I got to
morning.
tell you, I saw the small version and the concept beforehand.
All right, I'm gonna be petty and childish here. He saw the small version and the concept version. You didn't bother to say anything, Don, because I would have said maybe it'd be better if you have the heads, their faces there. Instead, it looks it doesn't look right.
The dinner, and I thought it was fantastic. There are lots of people who think it's fantastic, and you don't really care
Fantastic to laugh at.
that this.
I mean, I care because how could you not think about Dr. King and Mrs. King's legacy and not care? But also when you put out in the world, you can't control what people see. I think about the Rorschach.
Oh no. To the extent he is correct, but as an artist, you're trying to send out a message, right? And with these arms, there was cheers and then a silent shock amongst the audience. You'll hear the videos are out there on social media. As an artist, it was your job to, maybe do something better with $10 million. $10 million.
Test, the inkblot test, what you see says a lot about what you see about the world. And so the work is meant to be gone into. It's a call to action. You go in and
Salty Digital Dive. Watch it. Be family friendly here, Salty. I'm just kidding.
be in the heart of their embrace. So what people see online, I can't really control.
I love this because it makes you think more deeply.
No, this is how you know CNN is filled with a bunch of idiots. It makes you think more deep. No. Even the most intellectual person is going to say, it kind of looks like a cock because it does.
And I love so much focus is on Dr. King and not on her, right? And it's a couple and the importance of that support and power. But also,
this is how you know they told him, hey, we're going to be saying some nice things to make you feel good. Because I bet there's moments where he's crying himself to sleep, everyone doesn't see it. I bet he's getting phone calls from people too who gave him $10 million. Like, what the hell kind of monstrosity did you put in Boston?
you say there are so many monuments of the kings that we don't see them as real people. That was your goal here.
Yeah, I wanted to capture, embody the feeling of love in their relationship. There's a quote.
Yes, hands embracing love. That's great. But you know what really, captures the image of love in that photo where you took inspiration from it. You could have, put in their faces and have their deep love that they have for each other. Dr. King and his wife. I'm just saying. I'm not an expert in art. I get it. But I'm just saying, if I was putting the game, coach, you need to know, who's hugging who. Have their faces. There you go. Just have their faces. Just
What that really inspired this piece, and it's from Mrs. King's book, "My Love, My Legacy." But it says, to me, the beloved community is a realistic vision of an achievable society, one in which problems and conflicts exist, but are resolved peacefully and without bitterness.
And we're going to stop it right there, because obviously this is CNN, and they're going to keep on talking about how great it is and everything else, and ignoring the trolls and all of that. But let's be clear here: this is not how you honor a legacy, and this is $10 million I feel poorly spent. But if we're all talking about Dr. King, we also have to look at the fact of when he was assassinated. And this is true. He was a threat to the establishment. Now I want to play this video It's from Tucker Carlson, of course, on his show. But I just want to hear everyone's perspective on this one because it's important to share.
To acknowledge that it is Martin Luther King Day, and nothing should detract from his radical vision, Tucker. And he was assassinated by the U.S. government. You've talked about JFK's assassination recently.
Yep.
This was in the same period. And
mind you, we just kind of found out what happened to JFK and who was behind it. Government. I'm sorry. I meant to say the government. Oh boy. Hope I don't have to get cloned again. But yeah, government was behind it. So there you go.
And he was assassinated right when he was escalating from talking about racial bigotry to class and in the war in Vietnam.
I know.
And my cousin picked up that mantle and proudly, and I'm a very proud member of the Scott family. So I was rather upset to see that statue, to be honest with you.
Well, you make a good point that no one ever says out loud, but he had shifted to populist economics. I have no idea who.
Yeah, I can. Again, obviously, we have to look at the fact of the threat that Dr. King did pose to the establishment, and that is he was reaching out to different communities and making people wake up to the fact that there is something wrong with the economic system here in America and so much more. And his legacy is being whitewashed away.
Killed Martin Luther King, but it's very obvious it was not James Earl Ray acting alone. He had 2 foreign passports. He was escaped from prison. The whole thing is ridiculous. Why is there no interest in that question?
Well, I think that it's a big moment, and there's a lot of pressure when you spend $10 million on something.
Exactly. So what's the final takeaway that we can get from this? And that is Dr. King did leave an impact, but corporate media, the two-party system, will use his legacy and image for their own benefit to try and say, this is what Dr. King stood for, all while ignoring the fact that he was calling out the economic crisis in America, which, again, we're still dealing with even in our day and age. He was anti-war. Who knows how many more conflicts we'll be entering into the future, but hey, war is a booming business here in America. He was calling out the fact that, again, we have a government that doesn't represent us. And I think, again, that's a final note for this segment. It's up to us to carry on his legacy and up to us to break down our own barriers to start building a better future. The establishment's greatest nightmare, the establishment's greatest fear, is a United States of America. And here's hoping someday we see that day.